Okay, we're live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On tonight's show, I have a very special guest. His name is Mike Cox, and he wrote a book back in 2010, and it's a 2-volume set, but the first book is titled The Texas Rangers Wearing the Cinco Peso, 1821 to 1900, published 2009-2010. And he has written over 35 nonfiction books, many of them Texas-related. Mike Cox is a native Texan. He was born in Amarillo. And he started his newspaper career at the San Angelo Standard-Times back in 1967. And this is the book is his best-selling, this 2-part book. Again, the title is Texas Rangers Wearing the Cinco Peso, 1821-1900. He writes at lonesstarbooks.blogspot.com. And some of the titles that he's written are Train Crash at Crush, Texas, America's Deadliest Publicity Stunt, published 2019. Legends and Lore of the Texas Capitol, published 2017. Texas Ranger Tales, Heart-Riding Stories from the Lone Star State, published 2016. Gunfight Insights in Texas Ranger History, published 2015. The second part to this book is Time of the Rangers, Texas Rangers from 1900 to the present, and Remembering Texas Lawmen, 2010. And Texas Ranger Tales, Stories That Need Telling. But he can talk more about this book, the intro to the Texas Rangers really starting in 1821. So, Mike Cox, are you there?
I am.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, well, thanks for agreeing to the interview. For people who may not have heard your background, can you talk about, all the books that you've a lot of books about Texas, but what led you to write this first book in the 2-volume set?
Sure.
The Texas Rangers.
Well, first of all, I grew up in a family of writers. So when I was a kid, I didn't know anything any better than to aspire to be a writer someday. And happily, that's the way it worked out. My grandfather was an old-time Texas newspaper man, newspaper editor, born in 1897. And he started working for Texas newspapers during the Mexican Revolution. And he knew a lot of the old-time, late 19th century Texas Rangers and early 20th century Texas Rangers. So Granddad was quite the storyteller, quite the raconteur. And so, I literally just grew up hearing his stories about dealing with the Texas Rangers. He knew Frank Hamer, who killed Bonnie and Clyde. He knew Captain John R. Hughes, who was a border ranger in the El Paso area in the 1890s and early teens. So I think that's what early on stimulated my interest in the Rangers. And then I also became a newspaper reporter in the 1960s, and as a police reporter, well, of course, I had occasional dealings with the Texas Rangers. And then thirdly, after a 20-year newspaper career, I went to work for the Texas Department of Public Safety, which is the state law enforcement agency for Texas. And the Texas Rangers are a division of the Texas Department of Public Safety. So my job was, I had the lofty title of Chief of Media Relations, and basically what that meant was that I'm the guy you saw on television or heard on radio anytime something weird or crazy happened in Texas, which is big as Texas is, as you can imagine, is pretty frequently. So I had a lot of dealings with the Texas Rangers during that part of my career. So that's kind of the background of how I became interested in the Texas Rangers. Now, overarching that is that I'm interested in history in general, and certainly have tried carefully to avoid being typecast as only a Texas Ranger writer. I've also written true crime books, and I've written biographies, and I've got a book out now that just came out called 7 Million Words, Writing and Selling Nonfiction. And the title from that comes from the fact that I estimate that I've written a minimum of 7 million words over my career. So it's the same old words used over and over again, but still a lot of words.
Right, that's
a thumbshell in my background.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a lot of writing. That's a substantial amount. Can you talk about the advent of the Texas Rangers? You start the book off in 1821. Can you talk about how they started in Texas and what Texas was like at the time of the beginning of Texas Rangers?
Sure. Well, there wasn't much Texas at that time. I mean, all the land was there, but there were not many people in Texas. In 1821, Texas had just become a part of the new Republic of Mexico, which had a long revolution to try to free itself from the Spanish Empire, which it finally did. So Stephen F. Austin, who is known as the father of Texas, he he got an arrangement with the Mexican government to bring 300 colonists into Texas, which he did in 1821. They settled between the Brazos rivers and the Colorado River, primarily interested in growing cotton. Uh, but of course, the Native Americans were not hugely enthusiastic about an Anglo presence in Texas, and relationships between the Anglos and Indians deteriorated pretty quickly, and so there were several clashes, cultural clashes that ended up killing people on both sides. So Austin proposed at some point to in the summer actually of 1823, after his colonies were fairly far along, he scratched out on a piece of paper what's considered to be sort of the Magna Carta of the Texas Rangers, and basically he said that he had in mind employing 10 men for the quote common defense of Texas uh, to act as rangers to protect the frontier of the colony. So that was really their beginning in one way. In another way, the concept of rangering is something that actually evolved in England and moved over the pond to the colonies, and then moved down the southern or down the eastern seaboard, then across the south into Texas. And I like to tell people that while Texas and Texans did not invent the concept of a free ranging sort of paramilitary group to provide self defense, they darn sure improved on it. And of course, the Rangers are now planning for their 200th uh, anniversary in 2023. So that was the beginning of the Rangers. Their primary concern at that time was not law enforcement. Law enforcement in Texas was handled at that time in a different way, mostly by well, in time by sheriffs. And the Texas Rangers did not get legislative authority to become law enforcement officers until after Texas had become a state of the Union in 1945, but they still didn't get law enforcement authority until 1874.
Right, and at that time, Austin was what, a young 27-year-old Missourian, and there were other things going on there. There were these Indians there, the Karankawas, that were cannibalistic, and all kinds of. I mean, it started off really the foundation where the Rangers were was really at the beginning Indian wars, and also working with the Spanish slash the new Mexican authorities. Right, I didn't know that Austin spent 14 months in Mexico City trying to figure out how to develop the land. That was an interesting thing I learned in your book. Also, they were supposed to practice Roman Catholicism, so
Yeah,
there was already tensions.
indeed. But yeah, really the first half century of their existence, from Austin's time up through the early 1870s, uh, the Rangers were primarily about Indian Indian fighting. Of course, now today there's a lot of debate over the morality of that. My answer is that you cannot judge 19th century behavior by 21st century morality. I mean, it just is, it's your classic apples and oranges sort of difference. You just can't do it. And, right or wrong by today's standards, in the 1820s, 1830s, 1840s, 1850s, 1860s, and 1870s, they believed they were doing the right thing. And one thing they were absolutely doing, which was, protecting their own. I mean, they were protecting their families and other people. I mean, if you set aside the overall cultural consideration of, well, was it right for Anglos to encroach on the Native American land? It was right for either side, the Native Americans or the Texans and the Rangers, to protect themselves and their families. So, you know, that's a real controversial issue, and we could talk about it the rest of the day. But I try to see it in simpler terms that they were doing what they thought was right at the time, and in the course of doing that, they established uh, really a first a local reputation, and then a national reputation, and then now they of course enjoy a worldwide reputation. Almost anybody in any country has probably heard of the Texas Rangers, and I'm
Yeah,
not talking about the baseball team.
right. No, like the real Texas Rangers.
Yeah, the
I
real
mean,
Texas Rangers.
they had to, constantly fight. They were constantly thieves and what they had called Indians back then, and I mean, there's murders. It was brutal, so it was kind of a kill or be killed situation. Would you agree with that?
No, absolutely. I mean, it was yeah, so it was Darwinism at work. I mean, survival of the fittest. I mean, there's no question about that. It was there was a lot of brutality on both sides. I mean, the one of the things that I talk about in the wearing the Cinco Peso. Interesting story. There was a ranger who, at least the legend is, his parents were killed by Indians. Possibly true, or another version is that somebody in his family was killed by Indians. But anyway, the Rangers had a fight with Indians in I'm going to say around 1874, 1875. I don't have the book in front of me, but uh, they they captured a young warrior, and this guy who may have lost family to the Comanches wanted to just summarily kill him, but the lieutenant in charge of this particular group of rangers said, "No, we don't kill our prisoners. Let's take him to Austin and see what they want to do." So they put him on a pack mule and took him into the capital city of Austin, and actually took him to the governor, who at that time was pretty much in charge of the Rangers through his adjutant general. Uh, Presented him to the governor. And the governor said he didn't ask for any Indians, and so they didn't know what else to do with him, and so they actually booked him into the Travis County Jail in Austin. Well, this same ranger that wanted to kill the Indian initially had another idea, which was to put the Indian on display, and so he went to a print shop in Austin and had flyers produced. Come see the Indian. And of course, he cut a deal with a local opera house. And had flyers produced that said, "Come see the wild Indian for, I don't know, 25 cents a person," and started distributing these flyers with the intention of checking the warrior out of the jail and taking him to the opera house and putting him on stage so that Austinites and anybody else in the area could see what a real wild Indian looked like. Well, to the state's credit, as soon as the adjutant general, who at that time was the person in charge of the Texas Rangers, as soon as he heard of what was going on, he quashed it, prevented it from happening. But that shows how brutal and inconsiderate really both sides were of the other, because they were fighting for their way of life, and you can't you you really. from our standpoint, or even then, you can't really logically blame either side for that. I mean, the Indians were fighting for their land and for their safety, and the Texans were fighting to acquire the Indian land and for their safety.
Right. And can you talk about the Rangers' involvement in the Texas Republic and the move towards U.S. statehood?
Sure. Uh, the Rangers steadily over the years became more and more institutionalized. It was a slow process. These early Rangers were nothing like the Rangers of today. But during the Republic of Texas times, the leadership of the Republic realized the value of having a paramilitary uh, group uh, that had mobility and a strong urge to fight and the skills to do it successfully. And so the Rangers were active during the Republic of Texas time. Probably the most one of the most famous 19th century Texas Rangers was Jack Hayes, who was a young surveyor who came to Texas from Tennessee and uh, learned the country around San Antonio and Austin by surveying the land. And of course, Native Americans did not like to see men with tripods and transits because they knew that those were instruments for stealing land. Uh, and so he had several scrapes with Native Americans in the process of being a surveyor, and then say he became a Texas Ranger, and he was a slight man, but apparently quite the man. Really became or seems to have been a natural leader, and probably he probably played a more important role in establishing the myths and mythology and legend of the Texas Rangers than any other person. He was known as a fearless fighter. The Indians reflected that they called him that the Devil Jack because he was such a strong fighter. And of course, it was during the Republic of Texas times that the Rangers acquired the first revolving pistols. Uh, People think that they were six shooters, but they were actually not at first. They shot 5 rounds. They were 38 caliber, but the Indians at that time were armed only with lances and bows and arrows. So if a ranger had two pistols loaded with 5 rounds each, that meant that he could get off 10 rounds before he had to reload. And uh, essentially, in that time, it was the equivalent of having an atomic bomb. I mean, it gave the Rangers a tremendous uh, tactical advantage over the Native Americans. And it was Hayes who was smart enough to realize that uh, technology should be taken advantage of, and he got his men armed, and uh, the Indians really learned the hard way, how effective these weapons were. Then it was another Texas Ranger, Samuel Walker, who during the Mexican War, which came right after uh, Texas, the Republic of Texas ended after about 9 years, and Texas became a part of the State of the Union. Uh, Walker was active fighting as a ranger in the Mexican War. The U.S. Army allowed men who had been Texas Rangers to enlist. Uh, tacitly they were under military control. Their pay came from the federal government, but to their mind, they continued being freelance Texas Rangers, and they were they treated the Mexican people pretty brutally. Still sore over the Alamo and the deaths that were connected to the Texas Revolution. So Walker was one of these Rangers. He had already established a reputation under Jack Hayes. Well, uh, Walker during a slowdown in the hostilities went to Maryland and met with Samuel Colt, the inventor of the revolving five-shot pistol, and suggested some improvements based on his combat experience of having used the weapons. One suggestion he had, which of course produced the gun that won the West, was for uh, Colt to add an additional chamber to the cylinders of his weapons, which would make the revolvers six shooters. And then the second suggestion was to increase the size of the caliber of the bullet and design the chambers in such a way that, or the cylinder in such a way that it could take a little bit higher pressure, so that the round could have a little bit more muzzle velocity. So that's what happened, and that's what gave the Old West the six shooter.
That was it, right? 4 pounds too. It was a heavy gun.
Oh yeah, it was like carrying a little small cannon, but it was again for the standards of the day devastatingly powerful. With that muzzle velocity, it had a much more effective uh, ability to kill people, and better range, and one extra round. They didn't have to stop and load, so it was really the Rangers were integral not only in the development of Texas, but if you look at the role that they had in the development of the six-shot revolver, that had a profound effect, really over the rest of U.S. history. I mean, we're still dealing. Of course, most people today use semi-automatic handguns, but we're still dealing with the issues related to powerful handguns.
Right. So it goes all the way back to the Rangers, and they were involved in so many of the not only the frontier wars, but the battle. What in 19 was it 35 against Santa Anna, and then all the way up to the war with Mexico after they was statehood. Can you talk about those earlier battles, like 1835?
Yeah, the when the Alamo was besieged in actually early 1836. Uh, William Barrett Travis, who was the young uh, commander of the Alamo garrison, sent out letters pleading for assistance. They were surrounded by overwhelmingly larger force of Mexican soldiers under General Santa Anna. Uh, there was no great rush to the Alamo, but 32 men who were Texas Rangers from Gonzales, which is a town about 65 miles from San Antonio, did indeed go to the Alamo, and to a man, they died in the Alamo. So that was really the the first really, actually probably the largest single loss of a group of men who were known as Texas Rangers. Now, I guess this is a good time to say that there's been a lot of parsing over exactly what the definition of a Texas Ranger is. That's been a very fluid sort of thing over the years. Uh, there are some historians who would argue that those 32 men who went to the Alamo were not really uh, traditional Texas Rangers, that they were more volunteers than anything else. But it gets even murkier because most of the Rangers at that time were volunteer. They didn't really start being paid until the Republic of Texas era, which came after the defeat of Santa Anna at the Battle of San Jacinto on April 21st of 1836. Uh, so that was the the largest use of what we would call Rangers during the Mexican Revolution.
And so then, what can you talk about, like the McCulloughs, San Jacinto, and kind of how that developed, like how Texas claimed portions of significant amount of Mexican territory?
Sure. Once the Texas Army under General Sam Houston prevailed at the Battle of the Alamo, and there were a few men, a handful of men among Houston's men who either had been Rangers or who would become Rangers, but most of the Rangers had been involved in the Alamo earlier. But once Texas won its shaky independence from Mexico, it did claim a lot more territory than is in the state today. In fact, the land that the republic claimed included portions of what are now Oklahoma, New Mexico, Colorado, and all the way up into Wyoming. And I always said that's the worst thing that ever happened to Texas is we lost that ski country when the
Right.
when the when Texas became a state. The size of it was whittled down considerably. Of course, that was more land than Texas at that time could even remotely think about controlling. I mean, they had, they may have claimed up in the Wyoming, and there are maps that show, the Republic of Texas extending that far north. But uh, Texas tried unsuccessfully to gain control over Santa Fe, New Mexico, to capitalize on the rich trade route known as the Santa Fe Trail that connected uh, Missouri to Santa Fe. Uh, an expedition was sent from Texas, uh, and again, these were just volunteer, you know, freebooters. They weren't. Nobody ever called them Texas Rangers, but they uh, they went to try to claim Santa Fe and hopefully establish this trade. And uh, at that time, uh, the Mexican army still held control over New Mexico, and they were relatively quickly captured by Mexican soldiers and sent to prison in near Mexico City. So it was pretty much of a flop. Texas, the Republic of Texas, it certainly gets glamorized, and it had its glamorous moments, and you know, a lot of Texans say, "Oh, too bad we didn't stay a republic." But the real truth is that the republic never had sufficient funds to govern a nation or to benefit themselves. Um, they were always under the shadow of Mexico. I mean, it's you know Mexico probably could have reinvaded Texas. In fact, did make a couple of attempts to retake Texas. So it was a good thing when Texas did finally become a state of the union.
They kind of had the resources to engage in sustainable political system. But they're also kind of the Mexicans were working with the Indians to destabilize the republic too. Can you talk about that?
Yes, that's true. The Mexicans were certainly a uh, worthy adversary. No question about that. And they were smart. Uh, they had a good army. And so what they did try to get some of the Indians to side with them. That's another really great myth. Um, I think a lot of people think that the Native Americans were always opposed to the Anglos, and that all Native Americans got along just perfectly with each other, both of which are not true. The Native Americans, certain tribes have been fighting each other for generations by the
Right,
time
hundreds of
the
years. Yeah,
Anglos.
hundreds of years.
Yes, yes, and so. But the Mexicans, they were of course aware of that, and they did try to aggravate Texas by, arming Indians and turning the Indians against Texas. And it made for a skirmish in which a fair number, modest number, were killed, but it never amounted to anything much more than that. It's just an idea.
And the original Rangers kind of took on some traits of the Native Americans. Is that true? I thought they wore skins and kind of fought like them on the horses. Is that correct?
Well, actually, the early Texas Rangers were very adaptive, and they really borrowed from uh, two cultures. Really, that yes, you're right. They borrowed from the Native American culture in their tactics. And fighting on horseback, and they definitely learned from fighting Native Americans. And then, secondly, but actually, firstly, in terms of how it evolved, the Rangers were very much influenced by both Spanish law enforcement when Texas was a province of New Spain, and also Mexican American, or not the Republic of Mexico law enforcement. One of the one of the doctrines of both Spain and Mexico uh, was the matter of a law enforcement body being sort of a one-stop criminal justice system. In other words, if Mexican and especially if Spanish uh, uh, frontier riders encountered a group of cattle thieves, they executed them on the spot. I mean, there was no. They basically had full authority to handle the whole range of criminal justice, from law enforcement to prosecution to carrying out the letter of the law. Uh, and so that added to the early ranger reputation of being pretty brutal, of sometimes not taking prisoners, and just you know they encountered cattle thieves or lawbreakers. This is early on, just settling it right there.
Right.
Uh,
So yeah, wasn't it the alcalde they like took from the Spanish system of kind of that kind of sheriff almost?
yes, the Spain issued what was called the La Accorda, the Accord, La Acordada, and that basically empowered their rural riders, their rural constabulary, to you know find and prosecute without having to burden their court system. Uh, and that practice of you know uh, shoot first and ask questions later really continued to some extent into the early 20th century. And we can get to that in a minute, but uh,
Right.
it took
But
a
that's
long time before that got outgrown.
but I mean you can kind of see that beginning because you're even the title of your book, the Cinco Peso, is kind of their mark on a Spanish silver eight piece, right? So they put the five marks on there, and that's still kind of their moniker to this day, correct?
Yes, I got that title from actually uh, modern Ranger slang, or at least Ranger slang when I was there, which was up until the year 2000. Uh, Individual modern Rangers would, in the course of their conversation, they might ask one of their colleagues, "Well, how long have you been wearing the Cinco Peso?" Which translates into, "How long have you been a Ranger?" So, wearing the Cinco Peso, became a synonymous term for being a Texas Ranger. But these early Rangers didn't have badges at all. But the first Ranger badges were, as you say, a Mexican Cinco Peso piece, 5 peso piece, uh, made out of silver. And silver is pretty malleable, so they literally would, cut out uh, enough of the coin, to have a circle around the star, and that became the Ranger uh, badge from then on. Really, I mean, in modern times, they or what used to be modern times, they dropped the Cinco Peso for a while, but in the early 1960s, they returned to that tradition of making the badges out of a silver piece.
Interesting. That's cool. And how did the Rangers progress from the post-Mexican American War to the turn of the century, right there in 1900?
Well, the really critical thing, I mean, the Rangers continued uh, working after Texas became a state. The Rangers worked along with the U.S. Army to try to defend the Texas frontier. Uh, the the two never got along all that famously, but they did work together, uh, and that continued through the 1840s and through the 1850s. Then, when the Civil War came, of course, the U.S. Army vacated the state, and most able-bodied Texans, ended up in the Confederate military service. But the function of the Rangers continued in Texas because just because in fact, aggravated by the fact that the U.S. military had left, the Indians became even uh, more difficult, and they took advantage of the situation and tried to regain some of their territory along the frontier. But there were rangers employed by the Confederate state of Texas who tried to deal with them. So, but still, from Stephen F. Austin up to this point of the Civil War, still that's all they did was protect the state against hostile Native Americans. Uh, Finally, after the Civil War, in the early 1870s, uh, the U.S. military had pretty much gotten the Indian situation in Texas under control. The last of the really serious Indian fighting in Texas was over with by uh, militarily by about 1876. Well, in 1874, the Texas legislature uh, decided to basically reinvent the Texas Rangers, and for the first time in their history, uh, gave them law enforcement authority. And they had statewide authority, which was unlike any police chief or constable or sheriff. Only had law enforcement authority in their particular jurisdiction, but these rangers had statewide authority, and so that really was a huge development for Texas. And that happened in 1874 uh, with the creation of what was called the Frontier Battalion. They still were not legislatively referred to as the Texas Rangers, even though generically they were called Rangers. But after that point, the focus became not Native Americans, but uh, cattle thieves and other outlaws, stagecoach robbers, eventually train robbers. That preoccupied the Rangers from the mid 1870s up through the late 1890s.
Right. So that was it. I mean, there's so much more information. It's a very thorough read. So much information about the Texas Rangers. Is there anything you'd like to add? Anything I missed before we wrap up this interview? We're at about 40 minutes.
Sure. Uh, no, I mean the Rangers have been cussed and discussed over the years. I like to steal a line from Clint Eastwood and say that the story of the Rangers is about the good, the bad, and the ugly. But if you weigh everything they did, they really have done more good for Texas than bad. Yes, indeed, they certainly overstepped their authority at times, but now they're considered one of the best law enforcement agencies anywhere, and they have a tremendous reputation, and
Right.
they earned it.
Yeah, they did. It was super dangerous. I mean, that frontier life was extremely perilous. from a wide variety of things. Where's the best place for people to buy the book?
Well, good old Amazon. They've got most of the market cornered, but of course you can also get it from the large box bookstores. It's still available that way. Uh, but
And do you have social media, or is there a way for people to reach
yes,
out?
yeah, you gave an old blog address for me. My website is real easy. It's all one word, MikeCoxAuthor.com. MikeCoxAuthor.com. And all my books are listed on that, and I also post things, extra material that I've written and that sort of thing. So I certainly would encourage any of your listeners to, if they want to know anything more about me or what I've done or to get in touch with me, even just go to
The website.
MikeCoxAuthor.com.
All right, it's all one word, MikeCoxAuthor.com, right?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
author.com.
And the title of this book, again, it's a two-part book. The first part is The Texas
During the
Range.
Cinco Peso, the Texas Rangers, and the other one, as you said, is Time of the Rangers, which takes the Ranger story up to about 2008.
Right. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for the interview. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much, sir.
All right, take care.